the universe, let's get striking. Feel the power and the force of the mightiest fighting. Energy blast, hit fast, top beams like lightning. Who can win, a new god or the hands of a titan?
Hey guys, Smaug the DM here, and today, this is the day. We're doing this. So
You mean it's the day we're releasing season 4?
No! I wish that, but no. No, today is a fight between two kings. The old king, Solomon Pleasent, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hello.
And then, of course, the new king, me.
Has that been, determined by a legal authority, or are you just claiming that yourself there?
I'm thinking maybe after today we'll figure this all out.
Yeah, fair enough.
Today we'll find out who's the real king of Lost Tapes, because we're going over a, and I guess I have to put some context behind this. But ever since I released my top 13 worst Lost Tapes episodes, and since we've been starting the Season 4 project, Solomon has not exactly been happy about my number one choice being Monster of Monterey. Being the
I'm
worst
not happy about that.
Considering the fact that you even mentioned that this is your first episode you watched.
Oh, 100%. There's, a lot of reasons that I would say Monster of Monterey is nowhere near the worst episode of Lost Tapes.
And I honestly still think it's boring as hell. And I don't see why so many people do like this episode, because honestly, it's either pretty meh, or it's almost the same tropes as season 3, but that's being a little too harsh on my end.
Well, I think we definitely have time to discuss who's right and who's wrong, and what opinions are more factually sound than the others. But let's get into that.
All right. Do you want to start first, since you're?
I would like to hear your rationale behind why you like or dislike this episode so much, and what you think the flaws are. Because I think I've expressed more recently in my video ranking every single episode why I think Monterey is top 10. I think it's the 9th best in my opinion, but I'd have to check the exact numbers. But I remember there were ones after it, but I still considered it relatively good.
Yeah. All right. So here's my thing. Then I want to get this personally out of the way, because this is basically irrelevant. Everybody could say, well, that's a BS argument to even add up to your Smaug. I just think, honestly, the episode's pretty boring. The informational segments are just, they don't kind of work very well into the episode. Maybe towards the end where it's finally talking about the creature, but I feel like the informational segments are just about the solo sailing and people getting lost out in sea, rather than the actual cryptid itself.
All right. What other points do you have to consider this to be the worst episode of Lost Tapes? Because I will make a general argument that there are some bad episodes that this has to compete with here.
Yes, agreed. So what's another point that I like to add? So basically, how would I sum this whole entire episode up? It's basically, I'm gonna put this in modern terms. So basically, around these times. So, it's basically a Twitch streamer who just goes out parasailing and records the entire thing. And first of all, I'm not interested in the character. And the entire time, you could barely see the creature itself, unless somebody was actually pointing it out. What other things do I have to say? It's just honestly, the character's boring. Any other creature you could fit into this episode and it doesn't change. the entire plot of the episode. It does not change. You could put Loch Ness Monster in it. It's be the same plot. You could put Megalodon in there. It would be the same plot. So it just seems like it's...
So would you say that a third reason, because I'm assuming your third reason would then be that the character is bland, and thus your fourth reason is that the actual creature that is supposedly prominent within the episode isn't really something that makes the episode unique and you can replace it with others. Is that what I'm getting out of that?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Let's see. And then what else? I'm just going off by because I did bring this up in a more recent video, the meme that you did. And I just feel like it doesn't build any kind of tension towards the end of the episode itself. I just feel like it feels empty to me towards that ending. It feels empty. Like it's not intense or, claustrophobic or creepy in any way. It just feels bland.
All right. Is there any other point that you had to make, or were those your big points there?
Those were my big arguments.
Okay. I'll start by raising a counter to your first statement of that the episode is boring. I do acknowledge why some people might consider that, but I've also looked at a lot of season 1, and it honestly fits into how season 1 delivers its payoffs. They're very slow. They don't do a lot at the beginning, and it kind of does a slow burn. This episode does it a lot, and to your second point of like, hey, the information tidbits in between, I feel they are, I will agree, they are to really skip, like they keep cutting in every 2 or 3 minutes, and I do find that a little frustrating, but saying that this episode specifically is boring because it doesn't build quick enough, I feel is kind of disregarding that a lot of the other episodes also do that. Chupacabra is a big example of this, where like the first half, you barely even see the creature, and like you could argue, okay, first episode, Bigfoot does the same thing. Honey Island Swamp Monster kind of does the same thing. I'm trying to think. There was one other one that I noticed because, like, I think after Honey Island, they kind of realize what they're doing and shift the way they build up the creature. But Monterey isn't the only example of that sort of thing. So to say that this is boring because nothing happens, you then have to say that a lot of the other episodes do the same thing. Would be my first argument.
Okay.
And let me see. Your second argument was that it that you rarely see the creature, or that the character was bland? Because I'm trying to follow this as accurately as I can.
Character is bland.
Okay. I will somewhat agree to that. There isn't much to her. I would also argue that you can make the same argument for Chupacabra. You can make that argument for a good portion of the episodes, in that, hey, these are just people that are here to get slaughtered like a standard slasher film. So while I agree with you, I don't think that it equals to this being a negative slate, especially when you have episodes in season 3 where the character is bland and then there are additional sins on top of that. But I will agree that the character is bland. I totally agree to that. But I don't think that counts as putting it as a slate. And then your third statement was that you don't see the monster a lot, right?
Yeah, or it's extremely hard to tell because of the water.
I will say to the second part, the water does make it difficult. And grant, CGIing an entire plesiosaur into a couple of shots in 2007, 2008 might have been a little difficult for them, so maybe they were biting off more than they could chew. But when you take a look at what season 3 did with their CGI, this CGI doesn't feel awful, though I will say in the water, it's a little hard to make out, but I would argue that's kind of the point, that it is hard to make out. And the scenes where you do see it, I feel it helps sort of build that up in terms of tension-wise, because we can see it, the character cannot see it. So the character is blissfully unaware, while we, as the audience, have to just sit there and accept that this character is going to run into this thing's head any second, specifically like the end shot. I do like the aerial angle that they put up over the boat. And you're
right.
saying on this being like a Twitch streamer, I would argue that makes this episode ahead of its time, because this was 2008 when this came out.
Yeah, I know. That's why I said it. I put it in modern terms because it's an attractive female that's literally doing this whole thing, and I'm like, yeah, you're not getting me to like her. Sorry.
I just find that interesting. On the statement of them doing a bunch of like bits about the solo sailing, I will agree that a lot of that stuff is not spaced out very well, and a lot of it does not pertain, and it does. I think that honestly is where a lot of people get the idea that the episode's boring, because a lot of that stuff comes in at the beginning, almost as if it's trying to pad out the episode. I get the vibe that they're like missing 5 or 10, like 5 minutes of like stuff for the character to do. And maybe that's just because like the script is a lot more simple. Just, hey, lady's on a boat, we watch her slowly get stalked and then eaten. But I would argue that there are episodes in Lost Age where the scripts are even worse. So to make the statement that this episode is the worst, it just doesn't fully sit well with me. I'm trying to think. I think those are just 3 of your points. There were 2 other points, right?
Yes.
What was your 4th point, if you could run that back to me?
I just want to counteract your first argument there, because I want to be honest with myself here and say this. It seems like the other episodes in season 1 have a bit more things for the character to do. So that way you're somewhat more invested with them. Even in the episode where it's Swamp Creature, it was okay. Like, they had something to do. It was slightly interesting. But I felt like just sitting there on a boat, getting slammed by the creature a couple of times it's not interesting to me. That's what I felt.
I do agree with that. I think what they were trying to do in giving the character something to do was investigate the other ship, and I think that part could have been conveyed better. But I will also argue that at the minimum, like for me at least, I understand the tension that they're trying to build with at first the character being completely unaware of this creature to slowly being like, oh, hey, maybe there's something that's in the water. I don't know. Like, at first it doesn't even come across the character's mind, but over time the character starts to realize, oh, there might be something in the water, but then it's too late to get knocked in anyway.
Yeah.
But I can understand where you're coming from with that counter argument. I get that.
Okay, so then like my 4th statement. I think it was the ending was just too bland for me. I felt like the death of the character was just meh. Like,
he was slowly being drowned. Name another episode where we see that.
Oklahoma Octopus a couple times.
We don't see them get drowned. We see them go under, but like to simulate the notion of like being bobbed up and down, I don't recall that there's an episode where like we personally get to see that from a first person perspective. Because I think I've also made it clear that like Oklahoma inspired a lot of the water episodes that came after Oklahoma, and like a lot of them follow that. But in terms of like us feeling like we're isolated and getting drowned in the water, Monterey is like one of the few that comes to mind. I can't really fathom any others.
Maybe Kraken, but that's a bit of a stretch.
Kraken gives us like a more third-person perspective of what it might be like to drown, and I'll give Kraken that. And I've made it very clear that I don't know entirely where I position Kraken half the time because it's such an odd episode to me.
All right, yeah.
And your 5th point, what was that?
I think that was it. Pretty sure.
Okay. Overall, and I think because a lot of people say that this episode's boring, and upon my most recent rewatching of it, I think it's because of the info segments. I think that's what makes the episode drag. That is my observation from what I've seen. But to say that this episode's the worst, when, for one, I can at least see the monster, whereas Cave Demons, I genuinely can't. because I can't see anything in cave demons. Or
Except
you
for
take a
like
look
the
at
wings of the
Quetzalcoatl.
creatures. Except for the
Yeah,
wings.
and those look terrible. Quetzalcoatl, where the only times you can see it, it looks god awful. And Reptilians just overall is a structurally and just fundamentally worse episode. So I think to make this the worst episode, I don't agree Monterey deserves that sort of disservice. Especially when,
I guess I could
me
just
personally,
I guess I could add this on, but I guess I find it just the script of the episode. And I'm gonna go what you said. I just find it to be too simple. Because again, every other episode in the entire series seems to be complex, but I think the story in this one just, in general, just seems way too simple.
I think there are a couple other episodes where like they do make something a little more simplistic. I would first make the argument that Werewolf is slightly simplistic in that, like, hey, the killer's in the house. Okay, we're in the house. Okay, we're going to the basement. Okay, the guy got mauled. And, like, it's very cut and dry, very straightforward. And I would also argue that the Bigfoot episode is very simplistic, like, hey, I'm in the woods. I don't know what's going on. Oh, there's a guy stalking me. And then Bigfoot just comes in with a steel chair right at the end and takes the guy out. So there are other episodes that have a very simplistic structure, and those episodes are considered fine to a lot of people on this Discord server, as well as just people in general.
Mm-hmm.
So I think to single out Monterey seems a bit disingenuous to me, especially when season 3 just fundamentally, to me, has worse episodes.
Oh yeah, don't get me wrong. Season 3 has bad episodes, but again, I mean, for me personally, I just don't like. I really just don't like Monterey Bay, even though I still do think that some episodes, especially Reptilian, I think are pretty freaking bad when you really think about it.
You also have episodes like Mothman, where it's very clear that they're going for something and they just like whip the whole thing. So there are episodes where they definitely whip something, or there are episodes where they don't fully fulfill. But I feel like the simplicity of Monterey Bay combined with specifically the camera angles, I really like when Lost Tapes does aerial shots because they don't do them that often. And Monterey Bay is one of the few examples where they do. And I think that help conveys not only in this episode does it give us like a variety of shots, because normally someone's always holding the camera. There's always someone we can't see. But in this situation, we can see everything. We can also see the size of the boat and then compare it to the creature, which is bigger, thus giving us an idea of like, oh, dang, this thing's huge.
Yeah. I think the only other episodes that really does like that multi-view perspective is kind of like Beast of Bray Road, where they have all the security cameras.
I'm trying to think.
That's the
I know
one where
Wendigo does a really good aerial shot right at the end where the camera's spinning. Wendigo did that very well. Honestly, it's kind of surprising that there aren't more aerial shots from like air creature episodes. I find that very interesting.
I think it's just because they want to keep like the cameras down on ground level, so it's like from the character's perspective of the episode.
I can see that.
So,
and I like that Monterey Bay kind of gives us a third-person perspective where we're kind of a viewer of her stream, so to speak. We're kind of like this passive observer.
Although I did notice something rewatching it for this whole thing entirely. I did notice that at one random point in the episode that there was one of the aerial cameras that was just static, and I went, "What the hell is that?" Like, wouldn't you like? Yeah, it was weird.
I think because they were just trying to convey that like the boat was getting hit. I think that's what they were going for.
No, but this was before the boat got hit again. The second time.
A continuity error in Lost Tapes. I'm sure that will never come up again. But like, I acknowledge the criticisms towards this episode, and maybe I'm a little bit nicer on this episode. I'll openly admit that. But to say that this episode is the worst out of all 3 seasons, I just don't agree with that.
and I think it's just more or less me having a personal grudge against this episode. I think that's honestly why I keep it so far down. Um, but again,
Like,
yeah, there are other really bad episodes. You could look at almost the entirety of season 3, and you could just see that everything is pretty much crap. I think the only good
I
episode that
think
really, I think the only really good episode that came out of that is Wendigo. If I'm gonna be straight up
I
honest.
also I remember in my ranking that I was honestly slightly nice to season 3 because I remember Devil Monkey being passable, and I remember some of season 3 being passable. It's just the other half isn't passable. And there's also this huge middle ground where you have episodes like Chupacabra, you have episodes like Zombies, or you have episodes like I'm trying to think of an example from season 2. I guess Werewolf would be one I'd put in there.
Lizard
But
Man,
like, there's this
maybe.
they're very middle ground, and that's where a lot of the show ends up. There's only a few episodes I think that are like genuine trash, and like Reptilian's at the bottom there because like I just think conceptually overall that episode is just garbage.
Yeah.
And then you have something like Quetzalcoatl where it's just genuinely aggravating to watch. And then like to compare that to Monterey Bay, I'm just sitting there and I'm like, no, this I know what this episode's going for. It's going for like a one man Jaws kind of thing, and I get it. I understand. I mean, it's not Jaws from a narrative perspective, but from the perspective of like, hey, you're alone, you're in the ocean, no one can help you. I think there's some tension to that.
Yeah, and that's really interesting that you brought up the Jaws thing because yeah, I did get a sense of Jaws in this entire episode, but I felt like the movie itself built the tension of the shark a lot better than.
Well, that's because like the movie has a whole hour to do that bare minimum, and Lost Tapes gets like what 10 minutes.
I know that, and that's not being fair to it, but in those 10 minutes, you could really try to build up that creature a little bit more. And I guess that comes from like we both agree, the informational segments not actually talking about the creature itself, but more or less what the characters
I
doing.
I think the segments could have been spaced out. I think we could have gotten like one other money shot of the creature before the big money shot where its head is going straight towards the main lead. If we
Hmm.
had gotten like another shot of it in between those two shots and then also spaced out the info segments, I think this would have gotten a lot better. And granted, I think season 1 has a problem with its info segments because Chupacabra suffers from the same problems where it barely talks about the creature. It talks about illegal immigration for the most part.
Hmm.
So I think part of that is just season 1 trying to figure out what it's doing. So I think a lot of the things that Monterey Bay does that people have a problem with, I don't think those are reasons to consider it as like the worst possible episode.
All right.
Did you have any other statements to add?
I honestly no. Dang it. I think I lost this one.
At 50 feet long, the plesiosaur flies through the water like a great bird of prey. Clenched in its jaws is all that remains of Pod's clan.
I honestly really did think I lost.
It's all good. I like having genuine discussions about these episodes. If you want, we could like do more of these and like talk about an alternative episode and like talk about things with that. I'm totally fine with that.
Oh, you know what I'm thinking? You know what I'm thinking?
What?
Next fight that we do, we talk about the scariest one. And we know
Oh,
which
and we have.
and I know which two
Okay.
hills we stand on. I know which two hills we
Oh,
stand on.
totally. I think that would be very interesting. But like, I think this is something we could genuinely do more often. I think this could work
Oh
personally.
yeah, absolutely. I could so do this again. Totally.
All right. Well, I'm glad I could assist. Is there anything that you need to ask of me or anything like that?
Um again, I mean, do you want to address the audience with anything here or nah, do you just want to do your
Um,
leave?
Well, I hope everyone enjoyed this discussion on Monterey Bay. This has been a very controversial topic that our Discord server in making season 4 has been talking about a lot. It's
Oh
probably
yeah.
part of the reason that production's taken so long. We've just been so railroaded with this conversation. 100%.
Yeah, but we're getting close, folks. Don't worry. Like almost most of the scripts are done. Don't worry about it. Most of them are getting done. It's just there are some like writing decisions that are just being conflicted at the moment. So that's why it's taking us so long to get this all done.
Tender love and care. That's what we're trying to figure out because we want to make the episodes good. We want to make them faithful to the show, and we want to be able to provide something that we don't have questionable episodes or bad episodes like Reptilian or Epic Waddle.
Absolutely, we're trying not to repeat the mistakes of season 3. Let's put it at that.
Yes, I'm excited for the project. I definitely try to promote the project when I can. I'll maybe try to do that in my next video whenever that comes out. God knows when.
Hmm.
And everybody give Smaug a great old subscribe there because he deserves more views.
Thank you. I need to hear that from the legend himself. So
That just being called the legend within this Discord server is enough to humble me, so I can respect that.
I know we're not worthy. We're not worthy.
Well, I am glad that we have had this conversation, and hopefully this makes some great content.
Oh yeah. So, anyways, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed the entire conversation that we did. You know, leave a like down below, comment down below. What do you think about Monterey Bay? Are there any points that me or Solomon missed out on? Because we're open to discuss down there. Um,
100%.
oh yeah, and subscribe to the channel to keep up with more Lost Tapes content such as this. And until next time, guys, I am the DM.